One of the challenges when it comes to women in worship is that oftentimes we haven't been exposed to how the women companions used to worship, how they used to spend their Ramadan, how they used to spend their time in these spaces of worship. And inshallah, we're going to get into some of those examples as we have our discussion today. But looking at that framework, I want us to take a step back and imagine if we were a woman companion. What would it be like if we were in Medina in Ramadan? What would it be like if in Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ was calling the companions to go on the expedition of Badr? Because Badr happened in Ramadan. What would it be like if the Prophet ﷺ comes back with the news of the victory of Badr? And these are women companions who, in their experiences, may have lost one of their loved ones in Badr, or had went with the companions, were actually part of the companions that went to help protect the wounded, to help take care of the wounded and help with those fighting in the battle. So Badr was part of Ramadan. Coming back from Badr, finding the Prophet ﷺ had lost his daughter, Ruqayya radiallahu anha, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, the wife of Uthman radiallahu anhu. Uthman radiallahu anhu losing his wife, missing out on Badr, but caring for his wife, burying his wife. So sometimes when we think about Ramadan and we think like, oh, we need to do all of these things, I first invite us to step back for a second and ask, what was life like for a woman companion, radiallahu anha? And how was she navigating the many experiences that they were having as a Muslim community? Because right now, I think many of the experiences that the early Muslim community had are paralleled in the pain and the horror and the shock and the confusion and the treachery that we are witnessing in this ummah when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to Sudan, when it comes to so many parts of this world, of this ummah. We are witnessing it. And so our first question is, how do I best worship my Lord in this Ramadan? How do I best worship my Lord? And part of that answer needs to be, if we are part of a family. Many women live alone. Many women are their own roommates. Many women have other roommates. Many women don't have responsibilities to anyone else except themselves, or other adults who are maybe other, who all have different shared responsibilities. But for the woman who is part of a family, and for the woman who has a responsibility towards her family, part of Ramadan must look like, how am I going to support my family? But the way that we do that differs. The processing of that looks different for every person. There are going to be, like you mentioned, there are going to be women who there's an expectation. You have to cook I'm going to let you say it so I don't say it incorrectly.
Pakore.
The pakore. You have to cook the pakore. And for the sisters here who have those experiences, tell us in the comments, because one of our sisters, Zainab, said back home we used to make sambusa from scratch, hours spent in the kitchen. We have our beloved sister also mentioned earlier that for Somalis, it's sambusa, if I'm saying sambusa correctly, if I'm reading it correctly. So tell us, what is it that you feel like part of your culture, part of your expectation you have to make? Do you have to make it from scratch? Because when we have an awareness of what those expectations are, we can then also acknowledge that maybe those expectations are from culture and not religion. And I think part of the answer in answering this question is seeing that these are cultural expectations, not religious expectations. But how will my family be nourished this Ramadan? Are you the person responsible for cooking every single day? Do you need to cook every day? That's the first question, because cooking is very time consuming. And some families do have that expectation that they have to eat, fresh food every single day. Number one, of course, Islam does not require that by any means. Number one. And unfortunately, many times in Ramadan, people end up gaining a lot of weight. And Ramadan, instead of being a training opportunity for us and our nafs and making sure that we're not eating as much as we typically do, we end up overeating. We end up gaining significant amount of weight. And it's not necessarily just because of the overeating. It's also the types of food that are specific to Ramadan that we overindulge in. So that then is not, it speaks to another part of Ramadan, the concept of overindulgence, which is something we're supposed to avoid during this time. So taking a step back, am I required to cook every single day? Now from Islam, you're not. But if you don't cook every day and you are the only person who cooks, will it cause serious marital havoc or serious problems with your parents if you are a daughter cooking for parents, or serious problems in your home if you do not? So the first question is, does it? if you choose not to cook every single day this Ramadan, will it cause emotional upheaval? And if it will, you need to ask yourself, are you ready? Do you have the emotional capacity to have the conversation where you may need to speak with your spouse, your parents, whoever they are, and share that you do not want to do this and you want to find a different way to be able to support the needs of the family, or the family needs to change what they need as to be supported in for you to be able to fulfill other goals in Ramadan. So number one, you have to ask yourself, do you have the emotional capacity for that conversation? Are you going to listen? Are you going to be heard? Are you going to be heard? Will the reception of your concern be received in a way where you feel like it was worth the emotional investment to have the conversation? And if you will not be heard, how are you going to navigate that? You deserve to be heard. You deserve for people to say, absolutely, you shouldn't cook every day. You don't need to cook every day. We will all step in and we will all help. We can all figure out ways to work on this together. But your reality may not witness that. So the question is, what are you going to do now that you know this? You can choose to make cooking a time where you listen to Quran, where you review Quran. A sister mentioned that she had memorized the entire Quran just through when she was cooking. She would review her Quran, she would memorize her Quran, she would listen to podcasts about the meaning of Quran. She would spend hours in the kitchen, literally every single day, but she would do her Quran in that time. What are you going to do in the time you are cooking? Now, of course, if you have children who are running around, if you are taking care of an infant at the same time, perhaps just listening to the Quran on the background. And yes, you can listen to the Quran in the background while you're taking care of your kids. And you ask, can I speak to my kids? Yes, because you are listening to the Quran, yes. And you are answering your children whenever they need help. But you are creating a culture of Quran in your home. So navigating what you're going to do if you are not heard is really important for you. But if you are heard and you can have that conversation, what are ways that you can lessen the amount that you need to cook? So for example, maybe you and your spouse or you and your parents or you and whoever you are with can cook once a week. You can freeze the meals and then you can unfreeze them every few days. You can cook twice a week and you just eat leftovers for the next 4 days. There are so many varieties and variables. And if you have the privilege, and it is a privilege, to be able to support a business by purchasing a meal from them, then that is another way. I don't need to give you ways that you can cook, but I think the point is not every woman's reality is one where I can simply say, you don't need to do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Your worship is in serving your family, actually. Also, when your circumstances cannot change the mindset. This is worship. It is one of the highest forms of worship because you get the reward of people breaking their fast. You get the reward of the people who you are taking care of. You get the reward of them eating from your food. Inshallah, every single bite, inshallah, is a reward when you magnify your intention. That being said, Islam does not require you to do so. It is culturally perhaps an expectation. It is relationship-wise perhaps an expectation, but not something you are required to do. And that's why it's important for you to consider what is your circumstance when you're navigating what may be best for your situation.